Richard Wagner, the story of the little boy who wrote little plays. A very odd house used to stand in the quaint old Saxon city of Leipzig. This house was called the Red and White Lion. I suppose no one ever really saw a lion that was red and white, but nevertheless that was the name of the house. There was born Richard Wagner, who was one day to write the most wonderful opera scenes of which we will soon read. Richard Wagner's day of birth was May 22nd, 1813. That was more than a century ago. More than 1,200 months. Quite longer, in fact. Since that time, music has changed very greatly. When Wagner was born, much of the music that was being written had to follow certain patterns or models, just as architects follow certain patterns in building a house. Now the composer, when he writes music, feels a great deal freer, as he knows that he can make his own patterns, that he is not held in by such hard laws as those who have held back composers as Mozart, Bach, Haydn, and Handel. It was Wagner who did much to set music free from the old barriers. This does not mean that music today is better than music that is written by Haydn or Beethoven. Indeed, it is often not nearly so good, but it is freer, less held down by rule. When Wagner wrote his first opera that had any success, which is Rienzi, he followed the models of the composers of the day, but he wrote operas that followed, such as The Flying Dutchman, and Lohengrin, and Tannhäuser. He struck out a new and fresh path, which made him many enemies at first and many friends later. As we read of a great man, we must learn to see the world as it was in his day. Today we think of the world as the home of our parents, of ourselves, and as of our friends, as the world of Mr. Edison, Mr. Wilson, and Mr. Roosevelt. In the world of Wagner, there was not one of these. Who were the great musicians when he was a boy? Well, here are some of them. Can you tell one fact about each of the men whose pictures come next? Liszt, Schumann, Verdi, and Chopin. Wagner's father died when he was only about 6 months old, and the boy was brought up by his mother and his stepfather, who was very kind to him. In one way, Wagner was most unlike other great composers. He did not show any talent for music until he was almost a man. All that he thought of was writing plays. When he did study, he was so bright and worked so hard that he learned in less than a year more than many learn in a lifetime. Here's a picture of Wagner's mother, who cared for him so tenderly. When we read the stories of Charles Dickens, we make many friends, and they are among the very best we have ever had. They are Little Nell, Paul Dombey, Sam Weller, Oliver Twist, and a host of others. Writers like Dickens bring all sorts of people before us, but few composers can do such a thing. Yet there are some who do this, and one of the greatest is Richard Wagner. In his operas, a host of people live, people as real and as interesting as those of the stories of Charles Dickens. There is Walter, who sings the prize song in Die Meistersinger, and Eva, whom loves him. And in the same opera there is Beckmesser, the fussy old schoolmaster kind of man, and Hans Sachs, the cobbler. There's a lovely scene in the third act of this opera. We see a meadow light and bright in the sunshine. A glistening river flows through it. Everywhere on the water there are boats. Scattered over the meadow there are tents. Everybody is out for a holiday time. All is lively and full of color and bright and cheery. Now there pass before us the tradesmen singing in chorus. There are cobblers and carpenters, led by the town pipers, and every trade sings its own songs. Then comes a scene in which Walter and Beckmesser sing in contest, and Beckmesser begins. He stutters and stammers and struggles through his song, and finally, like a schoolboy who does not know his lesson, he breaks down. Then Walter comes to sing the lovely song, Prize Song, a melody that just sings itself in the heart of everyone. Do you wonder that with such lovely music, Walter wins the contest in the hand of Eva, whom he loves? Jolly old Hans Sachs is so happy over it that he begins to sing a rollicking song, and everybody joins in with him as the curtain goes down. Nor was Wagner satisfied with making characters who were merely people, just like ourselves, for Walter and Eva are people of our kind. But there are in the operas of Richard Wagner gods and goddesses, giants and Rhine maidens, and Nibelungs. Many of them have strange names. These names are easy to remember because they are strange. Wotan and Donner are gods. Freya and Erda are goddesses. Fafnir is a giant. Flosshilde is a Rhine daughter. Mime and Albrecht are Nibelungs. Oh, they are wonderful company, these gods and goddesses, and others of the company who tell their story and adventure in the operas of the Nibelungen. Here is Siegfried forging his magic sword Nothung. Now, as we have said, when we learn of so great a man, we always wonder what sort of boy he was. Well, when this boy was 9 years old, he went to the classical school. One of his teachers at least must have been very fond of him, and he must have been very fond of his teacher, for when Richard Wagner was only 13 years old, he translated from Greek into German 12 books of the Odyssey for his teacher. I intend to become a poet, he used to say. He read Romeo and Juliet in English, then he wrote a play in which were Hamlet and King Lear, and there were 42 other characters. All of these died or were killed in the fourth act and were brought back as ghosts in the fifth. He played the piano too, and seems to have been quite a busy boy as he was a man. Of the composer's music he was very fond. This composer lived nearby and passed the Wagner house almost every day. Richard always ran to the window to watch him coming. This musician was the composer of Der Fleischschlitz and Oberon. Can you guess his name? This composer's father was also a musician as well as a military man. This is von Weber. Children will be glad to know that Wagner was very fond of animals. Here he is with a picture of one of his dogs. His favorite dogs are buried in the garden of his home at Bayreuth, where Wagner is also buried. Wagner called his home at Bayreuth Wahnfried, which means fancy free. It is beautifully located at the heart of the old town. Later on, the boy read about the contest of the Meistersinger. He was then 16, and he read too a poem called Tannhäuser. He kept these stories in mind until he became a man and then wrote an opera about each. Thus we see that we carry childhood thoughts into manhood. Here's a list of the operas by Richard Wagner with their names pronounced. Wagner also wrote symphonies and a few works for chorus and orchestra, but he is so much greater as a composer of music drama that he is known mostly for his works on the stage.